So Patricia, how many minutes do you want?
I have 6 people here, but I think I'm fine with at max 12 minutes. I don't think I'll need
All right.
that much, but if
Well,
we could
we'll
just...
give you 15 because you do have a lot of people. So.
Great, thank you. Yeah, half the room, it seems. Yes, but you all have it on your screens. My name is Patricia McPherson. I'm Grassroots Coalition, and this is an informational with regard to Ballona Wetlands. This PowerPoint, as you can see here, shows Ballona Wetlands is underlain by multiple aquifers that act as one freshwater aquifer system. I bring this to your attention also because in 1990, when the Coastal Commission had its settlement agreement with the Friends of Ballona, Ballona was divvied up at that time. It was all politically divvied up. There was no science attached to that divvying up of Ballona. And that is a problem because the coastal development permit for the freshwater marsh system is all a result of 1990. And the main thing wrong with it was that it called and classified Ballona as a saltwater wetland, which it is not. At the time, they did not include the Poland report. Poland is the grandfather of all hydrology for the LA Basin. Ballona is a rare seasonal freshwater wetland. And this is one of the diagrams used for Playa Vista's EIR that shows all of the underlying aquifers. Next slide, please. And this is why it's illegal to harm Ballona's freshwaters. We've got Porter Cologne, the State Water Quality Act disallows the harming of freshwater aquifers. We have Groundwater Protection Acts and Groundwater Sustainability Management Acts that also do not allow for harming that groundwater. 2014, new things that we have. The Department of Water Resources, 8888, disallows the wasting of fresh water. And it's an interesting 8888 from the Department of Water Resources comes from roughly 1960. So these are long-standing rules, long-standing ideologies. All of Ballona, next slide please. This is the amount of water that the Water Board, 950,000 gallons a day, that they are allowed to de-water for the Howard Hughes contamination. That water is then predominantly thrown into the riparian corridor, which goes into the freshwater marsh, which is under the CDP 5-91-463 of this Coastal Commission, all of which goes into the freshwater marsh, and some of it is also sent into the sanitary sewer. Pumped groundwater from Playa Vista's gas mitigation systems can also be used on Ballona, all of this fresh water. We also have rainwater from the freshwater marsh system can be stopped from being thrown away into the ocean, which is the current practice. Next slide, please. This is the wasteful, needless throwaway of Ballona's freshwater from underneath buildings for the gas mitigation systems that Grassroots Coalition, in particular, worked with the City of LA and brought this to the attention of the city. We now have a new methane code from the City of LA. The Playa Vista site has a particular methane code for itself called the Playa Vista Methane Prevention, Detection, and Monitoring Program. And it has multiple experimental measures that are a part of it. Next slide, please. This is phase 1. This is phase 2. Again, the wasteful, needless throwaway of Ballona's freshwaters. All of this water from all of those points that you're seeing there, we call these spider maps, go to the sanitation. This is groundwater. This is clean groundwater that's simply being thrown into the sanitary sewer. So again, getting back to CDP 5-91-463 from 1990, nowhere in any of the agreements can you find any of the agreements agreeing to allow harm to Ballona wetlands. And as Andrew Willis told me, enforcement, If Playa Vista is taking away groundwater that harms Ballona by that removal, the Coastal Commission can step in and act. And that's what I'm asking you to do. And that is what I am asking all of the agencies that have oversight of this freshwater marsh to do also. Next slide, please. In December of 2017, as you can see, that's a drain right here. Here is our capped drain. I just needed to point it out. That's our capped drain. We now have that capped because of the Grassroots Coalition lawsuit that was with Playa Vista and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And later today in the director's report, we will be getting into further issues regarding the removal of those drains. However, what I want to show you is you were told by the Department of Fish and Game through Playa Vista's own consultant, which, by the way, SOMAS stated that they were also Fish and Wildlife's consultant for the past 19 years. I don't know that that is true, but it would seem a conflict of interest to be both Playa Vista's consultant as well as CDFW's consultant. In any case, they told you that the attorney for Fish and Game said the only way that there could be water here, ponding over that capped drain, is because it came in backed up from the freshwater marsh system. Well, here's a demonstration that that's also inaccurate, because we have the ponding that has been occurring from all the rains we've been having. And this is from March 2nd for that one. And you can see back in 2017, the picture, the small picture there shows it submerged, and the very following day it's drained because it was thrown out into the ocean. So now, thank you, we have stopped this water from being thrown out into the ocean. Next slide, please. Here we have the freshwater marsh. This area that you see in the back with the concrete and the wooden slats, that's called the overflow area. And it's also on the little diagram to the right, just below the left turn there. That is an area that is designed to allow all of the overflow from that freshwater marsh to go out into Ballona, to nurture Ballona, both its plants and its wildlife. That has been stopped from occurring because, as you see the little arrow at the top, drain to the ocean, that is a culvert that is draining the water from that freshwater marsh. All that rainwater that we've been getting today, what we're getting, is being sent through the main drain out to the channel and being thrown away. Why is this happening? There is no need to be throwing away any of this water. And to get to the really strange part of all of this, there's also a square drain out there that is roughly, I don't know, halfway up the tall portion, that there's a square drain that was put in 2008, 2009. Who put that in? Playa Vista put it in, just like they put in their illegal road that Building and Safety cited them with like 17 citations, and it was handed over to Public Works, who said, I can dismiss the citations from Building and Safety, but you still have to do compaction reports and everything else that you haven't done because you never got a permit. Well, I know that they never got a permit to put in that drain. We know from Google Earth Maps that it was put in roughly 2008, 2009, during a time frame that no development was to occur on Ballona until the restoration was decided. It's in a Phase 2 portion, in the extended wetland portion. And no matter all of that, I'm asking, what does it do? I'm asking the Water Board, what does it do? I'm asking Brody, the land manager from CDFW, what does it do? I'm asking State Lands Commission, what does it do? Well, actually, I have a photograph of it that shows from these rains, it's filled up to the top. It is now a stagnant column of water. And in none of the reports for this freshwater marsh system to determine whether it works or not as a system was it ever included in any of those reports. It was only even put in 2008, 2009. So Where is the oversight from the state agencies that own this land? This land is a public trust land. We bought it. You bought it. It's all public trust land. State Lands Commission owns it. Where is their oversight for the things happening out here, for the water that's being thrown out into the ocean, for this square drain that's filling up and acting in a way that I'm sure vector control would like to know about, because we've had major problems with vector control, citing the mosquitoes outbreak that we had last year, vector control citing that there is no clear line of authority regarding this marsh. Well, when the Coastal Commission originally had its CDP back in 1990, Trust for Public Land had oversight for the negotiations for the sale of the land. An independent party had management of this marsh area. In the 1990 settlement agreement that Coastal Commission was a part of, it was supposed to be the Ballona Committee, which included state agents also, and local CD11, our council district. It never happened, though. And through the years, it just kind of got shuffled off. And meanwhile, Playa Vista, of course, picks up the slack and now says, I'm the Ballona Conservancy, and I have oversight. So the kicker here is, I just asked Brody, the land manager of Fish and Wildlife, tell me about this square drain. Brody's response to me is that, it's not my job, don't know what it is, you need to go to Playa Vista and ask them. I get another email from an attorney from State Lands Commission telling me, I don't know what it is, you need to ask Playa Vista what it is. I cannot go to a private entity with a Public Record Act request and say, tell me what this is. Where is the oversight for this marsh? Why is all of this water being diverted and thrown away? Playa Vista's own EIR mitigation stated that the waters that they bring to the surface will be cleansed and reused on site to recharge the underlying aquifers. Is this happening? Absolutely not. This marsh has a clay lining under it. It doesn't allow the water to seep down. This marsh has gases that are gushing up through University City Syndicate. Is that in any of the reports that Playa Capital puts out? Absolutely not. Where is the oversight? So what I am asking you, and I just had a meeting with the Water Board, who frankly didn't even realize that the water was being sent out to the ocean, and now they know. And I am asking for all of these agencies that are part of, well, Fish and Game certainly has its stream bed agreement, which all of this falls under it. Brody should know what this is. All of Fish and Game should know what that square drain does. They know what's functioning out there. Why is Fish and Game allowing all of this water to be diverted and thrown away out into the ocean? Why is the State Lands Commission telling me to go talk to Playa Vista about how this thing works out there? Why isn't State Lands Commission stepping in saying, do not throw this water away? And ultimately, CDP 5-91-463 from this Coastal Commission from 1990, part of the problem is it's so archaic, and it was never updated after we acquired it as the public. We, the public, want to see these waters saved for Ballona. And as I said to begin with, there is no agreement whatsoever that ever allowed this marsh to harm Ballona. The DEIR that's out there now with Fish and Game, as Ms. Luce will tell you, and their information they put out states, we have to save the water for Ballona. It's dying because it has no water. Well, of course it does, but it's being diverted. Playa Vista has created a wall. All of the water underneath its buildings is being pumped and diverted to the sanitary sewer for the gas mitigation systems. All of the water from the Water Board, because we've got all these different agencies, none of them are coordinating, are sending the water into the riparian corridor, into the marsh, which only recently they're really aware that it's being all sent out into the ocean. Well, Fish and Game is aware of this. Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission and the Bay Foundation was aware of it. I have an email here. Next slide, Billy, please. Here's Crehan, Mr. Crehan from SOMAS, and you'll note that Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission is part of this, Fish and Wildlife is part of this, Bay Foundation and Friends of Ballona are part of this, that actually Mr. Crehan is saying that water from the ocean, from Ballona Channel, was coming up through those illegal drains. And this is the email that I mentioned to you that I had already provided to staff. So all of these agencies know that there are problems with this system, because this freshwater system, don't forget, is the main drain, is the cut through to the channel, is the riparian corridor. It's all of that. And this commission, its CDP 5-91-463, has oversight of all of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patricia, and I appreciate the clarity. Okay, stop. Okay, Richard Harmel, please.
Madam Chair, at some point I'd like to, I realize we
Yes,
can't
not
discuss
now.
this because it's not on the agenda, but at some point I would like to hear from our executive director, because I think the transcript and my memory of a year and 3 months ago are pretty clear.
Right, I think it's coming up in the executive director report.
Yes, so I'll be covering that in the Deputy Director's report, and we can have a discussion on that.
See, methods. Richard, thank you.
Commissioners, good morning. My name is Richard Harmel. I'm from Sierra Club, Airport Marina Group, ExCom Committee. The Ballona Wetlands is a groundwater-dependent ecosystem, and its groundwater is critical for the survival of the Ballona's freshwater wetlands. We're going to be looking at a short Vimeo that is going to be on groundwater-dependent ecosystem. It shows the danger of artificial pumping and how lowering groundwater levels causes the death of ecosystems. So as we're watching this, when we start, I'll be running along with the descriptions as to what's happening. You see the ground levels under the water levels underneath. And so during normal seasonal changes, you have water coming in and the water levels, underground water levels going up. And in dry summers, the plants depend on the groundwater as their principal water source. As groundwater pumping begins, artificial groundwater pumping, it creates a lower underground level in the aquifer. It gets so low that the root systems from the habitat aren't able to get nourishment, and so they dry up and they die. So similar to what you saw in this Vimeo, Ballona's fresh groundwater is being lost. The waters to recharge the underlying aquifer are being pumped out, drained, or diverted away from Ballona, being discharged directly into Ballona Creek and then directly into the ocean or into a sanitary sewer system. So for over 20 years, this cumulative dewatering process is keeping the aquifers underlying Ballona from ever being recharged, lowering groundwater levels and allowing the Ballona freshwater wetlands to dry out. Thank you.
I got to speak.
Were you going to speak to the Ballona situation, or was that going to be
No, that's
Steve?
coming from Steve's
Okay,
Deputy Director's report.
I don't see Deputy Director's report for South Coast on here. Is it-
Yeah,
is it
it's,
central?
it's, South Coast is item 17.
Okay, item 17 is next. This is the Deputy Director's report for the South Coast District, which includes this month 4 permit waivers and 1 immaterial permit extension. In addition, in follow-up to a request by commissioners and questions raised by members of the public during the public comment period of the Commission's December hearing, I'd like to also provide an update on the pending Ballona Lagoon wetlands restoration efforts by the State Department of Fish and Wildlife. We heard some related issues this morning during the public comment period as well. Now, in December of 2017, the Commission approved a coastal development permit for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to cap 2 existing unpermitted drains in the Ballona Wetland Ecological Reserve in Playa del Rey that had been installed by a previous private property owner. I would also note that the coastal permit for the capping of the drains was considered a short-term solution, while Fish and Wildlife is currently in the planning process for a much more substantial long-term restoration project involving a larger area of the Ballona wetland complex. And that larger plan includes full restoration areas of the site, including the area where these unpermitted drains are located, as well as other substantial areas of the reserve as well. And some of those issues we heard about this morning were not before us in that permit, but it has to do with that larger project and whether it's appropriate that it be restored as fresh or saltwater marsh. That seems to be the crux of the big issue. At the hearing in December of 2017, staff was recommending that Fish and Wildlife immediately cap those two existing unpermitted drains in order to prevent the ongoing resource impacts to those wetlands. And as an interim measure to stop water from draining the wetlands, and require that within 5 years of the date of issuance of the permit, the applicant would obtain a follow-up coastal permit to remove or appropriately abandon the remaining components of the drains and their associated lateral subterranean pipes that tied into a much larger drainage pipe that was permitted. Now, in response to discussion by commissioners at the hearing, staff revised the recommendation on the mic to modify Special Condition 4 to require the drains be capped and sealed within 30 days and to change the timing requirement for the follow-up application so that it must be submitted within 6 months and that the work be completed within 1 year after the commission acts on that follow-up coastal permit application. The follow-up application was also required to include the provision of a wetland restoration plan for all areas of the site that were disturbed as a result of the original installation of those unpermitted wells. Now, the deadline to cap the unpermitted drains was January 13th of last year. On January 10th, the applicant requested an extension of time to cap the drains due to heavy rains that had just occurred the week before. It created some extremely muddy conditions around the work site. Commission staff granted that request consistent with the provisions of a condition that allowed for that, and the applicant was then able to perform the work to cap the drains the following week. Now, at the Commission's December 2018 hearing the following year, a member of the, or about 3 months ago, a member of the public raised questions regarding the adequacy of that capping work and whether they were functioning properly. And if we could just bring up the slide for this item, please. In response, staff would note that Fish and Wildlife confirmed and provided evidence that the drains were appropriately capped. The work was done by inserting a metal sleeve to the interior of the risers, which you can see here in this slide. That covered all of the weep holes. They used a permanent high-strength structural epoxy sealant. In addition, as can be seen in this photograph, a metal cap was installed at the top of each riser using bolts and the same high-strength structural epoxy sealant to prevent the lid removal. Now, during the work on site, Fish and Wildlife flagged the native plants and an improved access route prior to construction, and they monitored all the sealing activities and ensured that no native vegetation was trimmed or removed during the work. Now, according to the manufacturer's specifications for the product, the epoxy adhesive is a permanent sealant. It's moisture and solar resistant and is suitable for potable contact, so we do believe that it's not going to break down into the environment and cause any problems. Now, in February of this year, Commission staff visited the site and viewed rainwater pooling around the south drain. That's the drain that's actually in where we believe wetlands would occur. And we confirmed the effectiveness of the capping at preventing that drainage. And I believe that was evident in the photographs that Ms. McPherson showed this morning as well. Thus, we concur with the applicant that we believe they have satisfied that requirement for that temporary capping to occur. Now, in regard to the required follow-up action, there were questions raised about that as well at our December hearing. Fish and Wildlife submitted a coastal permit application to properly abandon the drains and restore the site in June this past year, prior to the deadline for that submittal requirement. The application is currently incomplete, and Commission staff is continuing to work with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and we're asking for some additional information regarding the impacts related to both of their identified alternatives that address both complete removal of the drains and for abandonment in place, which is their proposal. Now, with regard to the overall Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve Restoration Plan, that's the much larger project. The public comment period closed in February of 2018 for the draft environmental impact report, and Fish and Wildlife is finishing their responses to those comments that they received, and they, in coordinating with other agencies. I would note that Fish and Wildlife has added provisions to the final EIR, the new document, to clarify that for all the project alternatives proposed, the two subject unpermitted drains that were the subject of our previous permit and their associated subterranean spur pipes, which are located approximately 5 feet below grade, those would be removed in their entirety as part of that larger restoration project. Since the areas where they are located would be subject to substantial grading as part of that much larger project, they would be grading out larger basins for wetlands. Now, Fish and Wildlife does anticipate that that final EIR will hopefully be released as soon as the end of this month. That's their hope, or very soon after. And I would note that staff received a letter from a Mr. Todd Cardiff, who's the attorney for the Grassroots Coalition, after the deadline for submittal of materials to be included for our addendums this month. But that has been distributed, it's my understanding that has been distributed to the commissioners this morning. And Mr. Cardiff raises the concern, the special condition 4 of the coastal permit that authorized capping, as written, he believes is not consistent with the Commission's intent because it allows for the follow-up CDP application by Fish and Wildlife to include either removal or proper abandonment of the unpermitted subterranean lines on site, which he believes should be limited to removal only. And by way of background, Special Condition 4 was modified by staff at the hearing. There were several issues and reasons mentioned at the time. Primarily, it was shortening the time period for submittal of the follow-up application. And staff's intent in revising that condition was to allow for evaluation of both alternatives, abandonment and removal, and their associated impacts as part of the Commission's evaluation for the follow-up permit. And that's because of the potential presence of Native American cultural resources on site, the continued disturbance of wetland habitat and vegetation that could result from both construction, staging, and stockpiling activities, and we believe it would be best handled to have that evaluated as part of a full application. But I would mention that I believe there has been there's some confusion here, and that stemmed from how this sort of rolled out in play at the commission hearing. And when this was happening, staff was drafting modified language that we intended to propose back to you. We were circulating that language amongst ourselves, and that included both abandonment and removal, and that was the language we circulated to Fish and Wildlife that they were in agreement to. But when staff read that language in, we did make an error. It caused some confusion. The summarized version that we gave, it omitted that word abandonment, and that was our fault, and I apologize for that lack of clarity. That has led to this confusion. The permit condition, of course, was based on the language that we had developed and circulated as per our original intent. And I would note, though, in response to this assertion, though, of the relevance of this, that staff would note that regardless of whether the CDP application by Fish and Wildlife is proposed for either of these two alternatives for removal or abandonment of the subterranean pipes, pursuant to the provisions of the Coastal Act, we will be required to evaluate and include findings regarding both alternatives in regard to which is the least environmentally damaging at that time. And we still believe that that is best handled through that full follow-up commission hearing. And we do intend to bring a full analysis of both those alternatives as part of that follow-up CDP application, which would be brought to you, the Commission, for your deliberation and consideration. Now, that application, of course, is not yet complete. We do not have a set hearing date, but we are tentatively hoping to bring that to you at a local or a nearby Southern California hearing location this spring or summer is our intent. So that concludes my update on the Ballona Wetlands project. Staff is available for questions, I would note that Richard Brody, the land manager for the Ballona Wetlands for the Department of Fish and Game, is here today as well to answer any questions. Now, in regard to the other items that are included as part of the Deputy Director's report, staff is not aware of any opposition to those items, and we're asking that the Commission concur with the Executive Director's determination on those matters.
Thank you. Just to clarify, the mistake was you left out abandonment as an option when it was distributed?
When staff read, there was a lot of discussion. Immediately before that discussion, staff had stated on the mic that we were unable to recommend limiting the future application to removal only. So we thought it was clear at that point.
Oh.
Unfortunately, when staff later read the compromise, what we thought was our compromise solution,
Right.
we made a mistake in reading that language and omitted the word "and abandonment" unintentionally.
I see.
And we created this confusion, and for that I apologize.
I see. Okay, I understand. Any ex partes? Commissioner Peskin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So words do matter. Let me start out by saying that regardless of whether or not there was an error, that error was actually responsive to the words that I uttered that day a year and 3 months ago. So actually, I didn't say abandon. I said removal. I didn't say remove or abandon. Now, you've raised some interesting questions, and obviously, I think this commission wants to do right by the resource. So to the extent that we should have had an argument about whether abandonment was more disruptive, we should have had that argument in December of 2017. But I think the community that I was responding to wanted removal. Having said that, I want to hear from, the best resource professionals and the community as to whether or not that option should be there. But it does kind of implicate a relationship between the commission and staff relative to that. And that should have come, I think, to our attention sooner. But when the commission actually makes a motion and staff reads it back, that should be what is in the condition.
Okay, are you going to respond to that? Because I realized I should have called the speakers first before I turned it back to the
Sure.
commission.
No, I agree with Commissioner Peskin. I'll just note that. That concludes our presentation, but we are here for questions.
Okay, and we will continue that conversation after the speakers. Patricia McPherson? 3 minutes.
Really?
No. So how much time do you need, dear?
I have a few people that have submitted cards.
Yeah, I got
don't
that.
think I'll need all that, but
15? Like last time?
Yes,
15.
at most.
Thank you.
Yes, please, the video.
She used all of the 15
Video.
last time.
No. Well, the sound of the water rushing. Patricia McPherson, Grassroots Coalition, thank you again. Chair Boschko, what we're about to see is the draining of the waters that I did not show you before that I had intended to. This is the actual culvert of all of the freshwater marsh water running out to the ocean through, it will be, through the main drain. And I want to bring your attention to the senior enforcement staff, Lisa Hagee, at the 2017 meeting stated, with regard to draining a wetlands, we think that draining a wetland is about the most amazing violation that you could have. I mean, putting a drain in a wetland is exactly the opposite of anything you do in a wetland. Did it play? Yeah. I missed it. You saw it. That's draining. And I want to also, again, thank you with regard to the capping that has been done, because it has stopped it. And Chair Bochco, you had asked for a report regarding that capping, because I had said that we weren't provided any documentation with regard to that. And that is still the same situation outside of a memo from land manager Mr. Brody, which simply cites that what the chemical was used for the epoxy. We still don't know who did it, what company did it. There is no actual plan that was provided to us. I question the materials of the metal itself because this is there is salt in the soils, and I do know that I looked up the epoxy, which is not a saline epoxy. It cannot resist that. So, and in speaking to other people that are used to these epoxies, the epoxy that was used is not one that should have been used in this situation. So that's just that. But getting back to number 17, this is a letter from Mr. Todd Cardiff, and I'd also say if there is a need for time to look through the transcript, that we created a transcript for you so that you would be able to see that there wasn't any other discussion other than remove the drains. The CDP issued by the coastal staff allows the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to apply for removal or appropriate abandonment. Well, that's exactly what Fish and Game did. They put in a CDP application for abandonment, which is what upset me to begin with, knowing we had the unanimous approval, which I immediately wrote staff to that and wanted to see the CDP change so that they would, at least at that point, include a plan for abandonment. Not abandonment, but removal, as you had all agreed. The abandonment in place also is construed as being done for the restoration. And I've heard also today that the public had time for public comment, which was stated in 2017. The public had already looked at the DEIR and submitted their comments. There is no one in the world, other than us bringing this to you, that even knew those drains were there. So there was no chance to comment in the DEIR about the effect of those drains on the wetlands for the past 20 years. And the fact is that Fish and Game had known about those drains in place for all those years. So it brings into question who, again, is managing to protect Ballona. I've provided you the transcript of the hearing. Despite the video evidence to the contrary, Executive Director Ainsworth claimed that it was not clear that Commissioners modified Special Condition 4 to remove CDFW's option to abandon the pipes. Therefore, I've provided a full transcript. The transcript establishes the Coastal Commission expressly required CDFW to submit an application to remove, not abandon, the unpermitted drains within 6 months. I've heard today also that the DEIR, the final, may be out next month. Well, that's not my information. My information is that there's a big stall going on because of the federal involvement in this from the Corps, and that there is review regarding the need for an alternative, for a freshwater wetland alternative, which this DEIR simply does not have. This could take, according to my sources, which include people that are on the project management team, a year, 2 years, more years, for which I am grateful because we're bringing up freshwater aspects that need to be included in the DEIR. Mr. Cardiff suggests a properly revised CDP should be issued and CDP application 518-0554 should be rejected. The Coastal Commission should order Fish and Wildlife to submit another application to the Coastal Commission within 30 days, regardless of whether the coastal staff inadvertently failed to delete abandonment from Special Condition 4 and Fish and Game was fully aware of its need to submit an application to remove the pipes from Ballona Wetland. I think it was very clear that day, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry. The only other thing is, I suggest that if there is a need, we can discuss this on Friday during the Deputy Director's report again. If you need to be able to go through this transcript, it's highlighted to show the key points on this, and you can peruse through the whole thing to see that there was no other discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, Steve, what you were saying was the option of abandonment is something you would look at as one of the options that would be whatever the best option could be. So it would just be examined no matter what, whether it was in the application or not. Okay. Commissioner Peskin, do you have any more questions or comments? Okay. Commissioner Padilla? Okay. Commissioner Brownsy?
Okay, so just so I understand, what you're saying is that the order was for removal, but somehow abandonment was added to the options that Fish and Wildlife were considering because there was an error in communication from our side?
In the error occurred in the amended language of the staff recommendation for the condition language. That was the error.
So when you generated the staff condition letter, there was an error in that?
Well, we would consider the error to have been in our language that was read in for the motion.
Oh,
But
you're
that
saying it was read into the
Yeah,
motion?
that was carried over into the permit condition. So
Oh.
I think that's the question, though, is what is the error? We would just note that there was a discussion of both that day, and right before that, staff had made that discussion that we believe that you need to evaluate both as part of a follow-up, but that wasn't the language we read in. That generated all this mess.
Okay, so having said that, then an error was made. The applicant went and chose the erroneously identified option. How does this get cured?
May I?
Uh,
Patricia
No.
did not
Please sit
use,
down.
she did not use her time.
I don't care. She didn't use her time. She used what she wanted. Please sit down.
Well, I think there's probably two ways we can go about this. One is we can simply evaluate this and resolve the matter through the follow-up permit. You'd have the discretion when the application comes before you to evaluate the project. As proposed by Fish and Wildlife, their applications for abandonment, but we've asked them to include the full evaluation of removal and abandonment. And that discretion is yours at that time, how you want to decide. If that is not, if that's not your desire and you believe this error must be corrected, then one way that could be done is we could issue a corrected permit without the abandonment language. Now, we don't have the ability to preclude Fish and Wildlife from still applying for abandonment or removal, and we could bring that application forward to you for your review.
And so what is the timeline for, are they currently in the process of submitting an application?
Yes, it's in the door. We have it. They submitted it in June of last year pursuant to the requirement that they do so within 6 months. It's incomplete. They've worked hard with us to submit the vast majority of the items, but we have asked for some additional information to get at this issue. The heart of this issue is abandonment or removal. We'd like some additional details to really be able to lay out both with specificity for you so that if the commission were to decide, regardless of what the proposal is, that you wish to condition it for the other alternative, that we'd have enough information that would allow you to do that and make that call.
So is it staff recommendation to go, whoops, sorry about that, to go that route versus issuing a corrective order?
Yes, we believe that is sufficient to have you fully evaluate that as part of a follow-up application, but look, we'll leave that to your discretion today if you wish to do this differently.
Madam Chair, if I could, I would be interested to hear what Mr. Peskin's, Commissioner Peskin's thoughts are, given the discussion that just occurred. Thank you.
Commissioner Peskin.
So I respectfully disagree with staff as it relates to what I intended at that time. I mean, I think what I intended was removal, and that is what the discussion was, and that is what was read back to us, and that is what we voted on, and that's not what the CDP says. Having said that, through the chair to Commissioner Brownsy, I want to do right by the resource. So I am Look, if we were to fix this, we would fix it by actually going back and taking out abandonment, because that is actually what was said on the record, and that's what we voted on. So if we are strict constructionists, that's how we would construct it. Having said that, I do want to make sure that we're not disrupting cultural resources and that we're not harming the wetlands. So I am open to hearing arguments about why abandonment should be on the table, but that's not what we voted for.
Agreed. Yeah. So, are you done?
You done?
Okay. I personally say that that's exactly what happened, and there is evidence here on the record that was provided by the speakers. But I think you're right. I think we should, and something as important as a wetland, we should look at every option to make sure we don't do anything untoward, considering that it's already been done. And I also think that we need Fish and Wildlife to get on the stick here and get this done, because it should have been done a year ago. So if you need any help with that, let us know.
Madam Chair, the other thing I just want to add is I think part of what we were, when we said we were getting half a loaf, part of what we were trying to do, and I say this as a former Trust for Public Land employee, was to speed it up. So, I mean,
Yes.
time was of the essence. So whether it's abandonment or what we voted for, removal, what we wanted was not 5 years, we wanted a year.
Yeah. Is there any issue with the Corps of Engineers, federal government? that you're aware of?
I would probably ask Mr. Brody to respond to that.
All right.
We're not involved in the EIR process.
Mr. Brody, could you just address that for a second? And if you'll just state your name.
Richard Brody, California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what was the question?
The question was, one of the speakers mentioned that the EIR was being delayed because of the Corps of Engineers,
Oh, so
instead
you
of
want-
us being able to get this done quickly like we had wanted a year ago. Is there any problem with that you're aware of?
No, we're working in concert with the Army Corps of Engineers. We don't have control over their schedule, but we are on fast track to get a EIR finalized within the next few months. And then
Few months.
Yeah, we would like to see something pens down July, August. And then, I mean, I hate to commit to times
No,
because
I'm
we
not
miss
going
so
to
many
ask you
schedules.
to commit, but I
Right.
think it's
But
really
that-
important for everyone in this room,
Yeah.
especially the commission, because they did want this to be fast-tracked, as you mentioned. So if you can,
But to
tell us the summer, summer is good.
Right,
I
but-
mean, it's better than next
Right.
year or whatever.
And what that's going to look like in the summer, certifying, waiting on the Army Corps' review, I can't answer for their timetable, but we're reviewing together, and we're trying to get it finalized through the consultant by that time.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I just note that what we were talking about here is the environmental impact report for the larger restoration project. That doesn't relate to the
So that doesn't
pipe
affect the-
abandonment. No, we can move forward
Oh,
on
we
that
can do
as
this
soon as.
without?
Yes,
Oh,
as
okay.
soon as we get the information from Fish and Wildlife, we plan on bringing it back to you all.
Okay, and when can you do that, sir? Get us the information we need to move forward on the drains.
All information that staff has requested, we've been responsive to.
I understand, but when do
Yeah.
you expect to get it to them?
Well, what is it you guys are waiting on at this point?
Well, we have some follow-up questions. I think we'll
Yeah.
follow up with Mr. Brody. We just want to make sure we have plans for the actual removal and the final details on the impacts. So we can take care of those,
Right.
and we'll do our best to bring that back to you ASAP.
Okay.
Right.
Mr.
so
Brody, does that seem okay
we're
with you?
Yeah, we're
We can go
finalizing
fast.
some plans internally and circulating them inside the department right now for review.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Commissioner
they're
Brown's,
expect-
you
you
have a
guys are
question? for
expecting
Mr.
that.
No. Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Thank you.
Commissioner Brownsy?
Madam Chair, maybe when this gets wrapped up, I just have like a follow-up question, just to the larger Ballona Wetlands issue, so whenever that's appropriate, thank you.
Commissioner Peskin?
So, Mr. Brody, or to staff, have cultural resource surveys been done? I mean, because the contention is that the reason we can't do removal is because of cultural resource impacts.
That is one of the issues involved, and we're working on a cultural resource protection plan in association with the larger restoration, which will be in place at that time.
But you know where the resources are.
We've done our preliminary surveys. We have an idea, but when we start removing fill, we have to have resource experts on site.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is a question on the larger Ballona wetlands, and I think I mentioned this when we had the hearing, a year or two ago, which is I'm still grappling with why is this so complicated and so difficult to kind of sort through. I just remember this has been going on for decades, and so I'm trying to understand that it's such a important resource and wetland. And so maybe you guys can just do if you could do just a report at our next meeting that kind of articulates the elements of the wetlands restoration in addition to the permit for the wells and the pipes, which are supposed to be gone. Because I was struck by the conversation that Patricia was giving us the background information on why is this water being drained out of a wetland, okay, and then sent into the ocean when the whole purpose is to nourish the wetland and create the ecosystems that are supposed to occur during the rainy weather. Certainly when you have a bumper crop of rain, it's an amazing opportunity to jumpstart those ecological conditions. So I'm just, not today because
Yeah.
but if you could put it on the agenda, I'm trying to understand. It's like the Bermuda Triangle. Why is this so difficult? So
Yeah,
if you could.
I think that we can do that and try to just sort out, describe what the project is about. There's a fundamental disagreement going on here about whether it's freshwater versus, a salt marsh. And so, but intertwined in that is a lot of other issues. So I think they're getting kind of mixed up and mashed together. So we can try to, tease those out for you all and provide a real coherent sort of
That would be so-
outline of what's going on here. What are the areas of disagreement? And so we would suggest in the May hearing, because that's
Right,
more
down
local.
south. Yeah.
It'll be up in.
Okay.
up
Thank you,
in
Madam Chair.
Oxnard.
Okay, Commissioner Luce would like to comment or ask a question.
Thank you. I would love to see a discussion of the larger restoration project or proposal or issue here at the Coastal Commission. I think that's a great idea. And I would also recommend that the Commission consult experts such as those at the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project, or SCWRP, who have been working with the Coastal Conservancy through their Southern California Wetlands Recovery Project for, 20 years now. So there is context for the entire South Coast that it should be considered when we're talking about Ballona Wetlands, Malibu Lagoon, Los Cerritos, and others. And SCWRP has led the work of a panel of scientists for many years to understand that context and to make management decisions based on ecological needs for the entire South Coast.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, is there any objection to unanimous concurrence with the Deputy Director's report? Seeing none, we concur.